Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Mann.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
What do you think about when you watch that movie now?
First of all, I want to thank all of you for coming to see this on a big screen. This is, we've been looking at individual reels, but this is the first time I've sat through it. Watching it projected like this, and so thank you very much for coming to share it.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Watching it now, 20 years later, what goes through your mind?
Everything, but it's a different experience every time I see it. But the eyes of the actors, particularly when it's projected like this, you really, because you don't get it. No, even on an 80-inch, whatever it is, you still don't get it. They were so good, Val and Bobby and Al and everything. You just, I was just sitting there watching. I forgot how good they are until you see it on the screen that's large. You can just hold on their eyes. They're just it's just truthful. There's no performance. I think that's because everybody was, as an ensemble, we were all so into character of the milieu of the movie as well as the individual people. Everybody worked on this for a long, long time before we started shooting. So everybody was in this deep of character before rehearsals. So it wasn't.
Can you talk about the casting? Where was Pacino and De Niro and Val and all those actors, those incredible actors? Were they all up front in your mind when?
The scene in which Bobby first meets, in which Neil meets Edie, Amy Brenneman, is at a place called the Broadway Deli, which isn't there anymore. And Art Linson and I, who's the producer, we were having breakfast there, and Art had just read the screenplay, and he said, you've got to direct this thing. So I was actually thinking of producing it, not directing it. And so I went back and read it, and then we had breakfast again there, so then we started discussing who might be in it, and it was obvious that it was Bobby and Al. So I talked to Al, Art talked to Bobby, and kind of came together. And then and I'd always wanted to work with John Voight, and I knew him somewhat, and so then it was Voight, and then Val Kilmer in that role, and Tom Sizemore,
And can you talk about the training and the research that you went through with the film?
Well, the research was living with and knowing some of these people. And Tom Elfmont, who plays the desk clerk at the hotel, is a commander in LAPD, plainclothes. And he and I spent, must have been 9 months, way before we even got into pre-production. Every Friday and Saturday night, I go hang out with him, and we would just answer radio calls from about 9 p.m. to like 2 in the morning on Friday or Saturday night, just rolling through the city on whatever was happening. And that's where we got the TV man. He's a real guy. We found him. He just walks around with this console TV. So we found all these characters that wound up populating this. But the real, that sense of the real vibe of Los Angeles at night, and that's where that comes from. I couldn't begin to go into all the research because we did so much of it. A lot of it's with real people. John Voight's basically playing Eddie Bunker. Eddie Bunker was an old-time L.A. bank robber who went to San Quentin and Folsom and wrote the best convict or prisoner novel in American literature called No Beast So Fierce, which Dustin Hoffman made into a movie called Straight Time. And I wrote the draft that Dustin Hoffman was going to direct, and we shot in Folsom for 3 days, and then went back to Folsom to do a movie that we called Jericho Mile. So I had spent a lot of time in Folsom by this point. Thank you. So I spent a lot of time in Folsom by this point. I spent a lot of time with the men. I had 28 convicts in speaking roles, so I really got to know that mentality, Neil's mentality, and we talked a little bit about Hanna. But then we did everything. All the training, whether it's Ashley Judd talking to middle-aged real estate women who were very respectable, who 15 years earlier had been turning tricks on Van Nuys Boulevard because they had 3 kids and their husband was in prison. and what the difference between turning tricks and coming home and making love to your husband, what that was to get that hardness, to get that attitude, or everything to do with the mentality of these real men as thieves. We went in and actually cased a bank, and they didn't know there was Bob and Val and Sizemore, and they came out. They were armed with weapons that didn't have. They weren't loaded, and the only people who in the bank who knew were the security. We had LAPD with us, but nevertheless, the idea of going in and coming out and being able to say, here's when we go in, here's where the cameras are, here's where the guards are. So we did everything. So.
And what was the process of shooting that incredible downtown gunfight?
We'd only get to city on weekends, on Saturday and Sunday. So we did it on, we changed the work week. Instead of a Friday to Saturday work, it's Monday to Friday work week, we had a Wednesday to Sunday work week. And then every Saturday, Sunday, we would go downtown, and so it was blocked and planned months before we shot it, and then it was built on the LA County Sheriff's ranges. And so all the training for that, where every post was, every piece of cover they have was all represented by flats. So all the gun training was all live ammo, and so that by the time we came to do the bank robbery, obviously it wasn't live ammo, it was blanks. Came to the bank robbery, we had to segment it. So that meant you were working on completely different material on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday we'd pick up where we left off on the bank robbery. It came from a perception of some people I had brought in to help with the training, Mick Gould and a guy named Steve Mitchell, who writes under the pseudonym of Andy McNabb, and both are very heavy-duty SAS. And there's a simple line that showed up way early on, and they said, well, the police are always in overwhelming power, and they don't do well when they're actually assaulted by the military or by guys like this. And so that perception, that became the drama, the drama that informed the choreography. Choreography has to tell a story, or it's not, or it's just gratuitous action. So there has to be a story to it. So.
That just speaks to the remarkable authenticity of the films and your work. You told me a great story about the restaurant where Neil and his gang have that great dinner with their wives. Can you tell? I
don't remember that story. It sure was Kate Manley's coffee shop.
Maybe. In terms of what was it when Charlie Adamson told you the story about his encounter with Neil McCauley? What was it about that story that intrigued you for so many years?
Just the notion that in life's way more complex in reality than is in my power anyway to make up. That that a guy like Charlie would have, and some other people like Charlie, who I talked about, Ann Hart or Don Ferrone, would have capable that duality, that life is filled with what to the outside seems contradictions, but they're not really contradictory. That both are true, and that it has a kind of a fugue-like counterpoint that comes into play at the end of it, which was very interesting. Very interesting challenge. In the universe of the movie, what happens, the events that will occur in these lives have to do with how they believe life works or what they want out of their life. And I was alluding to that in the comments I made at the beginning. So, this is, once Neil commits to Edie, he's abandoned that kind of non-attachment, rigid, functional risk versus reward equation, and he's initially successful in spontaneously convincing her to go with him. But at the same time, he's made himself vulnerable to be kind of blown aside from his course by an emotion of vengeance, which 30 minutes earlier in the film is never in a million years would he have gone for Waingro. And the reason, if you ask yourself, well, why did Neil and Hanna have coffee with each other, it's the same reason, because like pros, they know they're going to pick something up, and they know that they'll pick it up consciously, they'll also pick it up subconsciously. And what Hanna what Hanna gets from it is a woman. He sees a woman alone in a car, and Neil said he had somebody, and there's a play on the word time, having enough time, both in a dream and then also. So, it's those kind of intricacies were terrific to work on and work out.
I'd like to turn it over to the audience. Please raise your hand, and we will get a microphone to you. Why don't we go right there? He asked about the line in the movie "Time is luck," and you wanted to. So, did you? The question was about time is luck, and then
time is luck is what I believe in, and he's. I think Neil. Me personally, I think Neil is a very tragic, heartbreaking character, and I feel his expectations of what he wants to have in his life are tragically cut short, and I believe time is luck, so that's why I keep repeating it in all these movies you mentioned. But and then there was an image in a painting. He's a Canadian painter.
Alex Colville.
Alex Colville. There you go. Very good. That I saw of a gun on a coffee table and a window with water beyond it, and it just hit me that was a profound sense of a maintained, sustained alienation and loneliness, and that's how it impacted me in the painting. And so then I took great pains to reproduce it. There was so we found this empty house in Malibu where we shot it, and there was there's a glass wall, that balcony, that had this wonderful random seagull shit all over it. And I wanted to question, whatever you do, don't clean it off. It had a sense of being abandoned. Of course, the day we showed up, someone cleaned it off.
Ma'am?
It seems so strong and even perfect, having watched it, more than 10 times. Is there anything you would have done differently?
I might not have had the scene with Ralph. When I shot it, I thought it was a very good idea, but right now, watching it tonight, it feels a little too burlesque.
Let's go here. Yeah.
Seriously, beyond that, no, not much. I mean, the look on De Niro's face when he goes through that white tunnel, and then he goes after Wangro. We shot that 3 times, and we must have spent, I don't know how many hours, and it just wasn't there. Bobby knew it, I knew it. We just came back and came back and came back, and finally the third night, it just happened. And so no, there's very little. Particularly, and then the work of John Voight is so terrific. So that may be me because I know we knew Eddie Bunker so well, but it's.
Sir, there's a mic right beside you.
Right. Yes, I know you're going to be busy with your Ferrari project for the next 1 or 2 years, but do you have any plans on resurrecting Jericho Mile to the big screen like you did with this one?
This wasn't resurrected. This script pre-existed L.A. Takedown, and I was very careful to own L.A. Takedown so that you're referring to the fact that I took about 40% of this screenplay and did a pilot for a television series. I was interested in expanding all these characters and expanding their lives and doing a prequel and imagine what it would be across 22 hours. So then I did the LA Takedown pilot. And then a guy I worked with at NBC who's legendary, Brandon Tartikoff, he and I disagreed about the lead, and I said, no, I wanted to keep that lead, and then for better, it didn't go to series. And then it was about 2 or 3 years after that. And LA Takedown was shot in about 19, 20 days. So this was obviously a longer effort. So.
Let's go here, sir. Yeah.
First and foremost, thank you to everyone for having this even here at TIFF. This is probably the highlight of the week for me. It is an honor to be speaking to the man who is the architect behind my favorite movie of all time. A question for you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
From the bottom of my heart, thank you for making a movie that's both iconic and timeless. A lot has been made about the coffee scene, but my favorite scene in the film is actually the last scene at the airport. My favorite scene in the movie is actually the last scene at the airport when we see the culmination of all your hard work. We see these two characters, these two protagonists coming together, and again, McCauley's not going to go back. There's the shootout. They're holding hands, and then it's just that beautiful song by Moby playing. I wanted to get some comments from you in terms of what it was like filming that scene, and do you know at that time that you were building something that would become so legendary?
No, you're doing this. You have to be just doing the story, and it's got to be fresh and challenging. And I mean, as I'm sure everybody knows, there's nothing digital in here. I mean, they're real airplanes, and we're really on the approach to the runways at LAX. It was fascinating to shoot it because the planes were 250 feet over our heads, and so when they came through, the ground shook, and you were everything, all the work we were all doing, myself, the actors, the crew, everybody, we were kind of vibrating with the intensity of it, and you could stand still and realize you'd just been standing still for 5 minutes. It felt like you were working, but you hadn't done anything, and there's something really to be said for doing it for real. You're running down a runway. It's a long lens, but there's still a plane you're running in front of. There's really not a good answer to your question. We were all, except to say that we all believed what we're doing very intensely. We were all totally in character. I was in character of the movie. They were in character. They were in their characters. It's not something you could do now post 9/11. So. Thank you.
Hi. So I enjoyed watching this movie. This is a movie that I saw in my youth and seeing it time and time again throughout my life. My question is actually related to that final scene as well. Now when I see that last scene, I think of Hitchcock's scene with the crop duster in North by Northwest, like in terms of the rhythm and the pace of the sound and the light layering in that last scene. I was wondering if that was a consideration while crafting the rhythm and the pace of the light and the sound in that final scene.
No, we're just working with this film and that scene and what we're doing. What I was trying to find before I decided to shoot at the airport, which also probably an answer to your question, was something that came from the ordinary material world we're all familiar with, but yet is so depopulated of life that it feels like it's like a transient stage or a stage for transient feeling, yet it had to feel very industrial and very real. And airports at night kind of make me feel that way, particularly those zones of it where people never go. There's nothing about those little buildings or that architecture that's made for people. And so that was the big impulse behind doing that. But no, with nothing is I wasn't aware of the rhythms that you're talking about. The sounds were quite incredible. This is Dolby. This Real 10. Is Sean Belts in here? This is SR. Okay. Sean's from 20th Century Fox, who does this extraordinary job of archiving stuff, archiving everything they have with just tremendous responsibility, and was responsible for putting together this print from a number of film prints. So Real 10 was analog, right? Okay. The ultimate way to see this is probably with a mag, with seeing with a silent print and with a mag off the original 6-track. But the sounds are incredible. We had a complete sound design, sound effects during the mix for the shootout, and I basically threw it all out and went with the production sounds because they were so incredible. And the same thing with the airplanes. So.
Just time for a couple more. Yes, ma'am?
Hi, thank you so much again for such an incredible and timeless film. I'm just wondering, when you were writing it, if you were tempted to change history at all. I'm wondering who you were rooting for.
The answer to that is this gentleman could refer to both leads as protagonists. They're both protagonists. And so the whole idea of it is formed by Ford Madox, Ford Good Soldier, which is a novel that has a kind of a subjectivity that revolves with each character. When you're in a chapter about one character, you see all of life from his point of view. And so that's part of the underlying structure to this narrative. So it was always going to end this way. What I came to later was to try and get that perfect equivalence of the connection. And the thought that occurred to me was that Neil was fortunate enough to die with in contact with the only other guy on the planet who was really very similar and almost like him and understood him totally. And to counterpoint that with the fact that it's also the person who had just killed him, but that didn't count or didn't matter at that moment. And so that became kind of the end of a dialectic, which I then reverse engineered into a lot of previous scenes that preceded it to build up to that final moment.
Yes.
About how you visually design a scene in terms of, there's so much in this film and many of your films where shots and moments are seem very impressionistic, very poetic, which would completely go against, films of the similar genre. There's shots in this where you end on objects or background or shots you have out of focus that are thrown and it really works in a very, very poetic way. But I'm just curious how you design a scene, how you approach it. You talked about a painting reference before, and does that always inform you? How you shot list?
Everybody's work evolves. And at the time, I was very interested in negative space. I was interested in asymmetrical compositions and the things that would subjectify the experience of the film. That was the one imperative that I wanted to do. I wanted, to the extent that I could, bring audience subjectively into moments and scenes and characters. So if you think of a scene where Van Zandt hands the paper to Hugh Benny, who's coming in, and there's a piece of paper and there's a kind of reflecting sphere and there's an out-of-focus statue with no arms, no legs. So these things kind of, it's a combination of, I know the feeling I want to get, and the set decoration and production design is kind of getting it there, and then we move a couple objects around, during shooting. For me, it comes with knowing exactly what you want to do, not necessarily how you're going to do it, but knowing exactly what you want to do in as much detail as I could get. But I'm very interested in asymmetry and negative space. I think that a lot of definition of moments comes from, or in character comes from the anomalies. So I start to look for what's anomalous in a character's behavior, because that's going to give him that's going to increase the specificity of identity. And then I think that audiences we're way smarter than we know we are. Perceptually, we're brilliant. Our amygdalas register truth or not truthfulness way before our cerebral cortex even can name it, maybe way before, a couple 100,000th of a second. But audiences' perception is quite brilliant. And so I've always felt that it's my responsibility, my job, to use all these tools and constantly try to use these tools to intensify the experience.
In this, can you give an example of an anomaly you just mentioned?
I don't know. John Voight's hair, his shirts, his bolo tie. At one horrible moment in the film, just after Neil kills Danny Trejo, he's holding a glass with Campari in his little fingers up. I mean, it's just,
Well, I want to remind everyone that TIFF Cinematheque has movies, classic movies, great movies like this, every day outside of festival. And Mr. Mann, I want to thank you so much for making my dream come true.
Thank you again. Thanks for coming.